Just like honey, sweet to taste on burning lips. Wanna lie beneath the water, feeling icy fingertips. Soothing nectar to my body, wash the image from my eyes. Dirty streets and hungry people, drink the water, dry your eyes. Let's not look at the reflections, listen to the music made. Drinking water's ease the mind, thoughts of you begin to fade.
We need one more indictment to close out this election. One more indictment.
Good evening, everybody. We made it today. Almost didn't make it. Ronnie and I had to deal with the neighbor's dog. They weren't home, and it was out in the street, little thing. And I thought, wow, I hate to cancel the show tonight, but long story short, everything worked out. So I hope everybody's doing well. If you're watching here for the first time, this is called Divided We Stand. This is a group that likes to commiserate and share information about the politics going on We believe that there is no way that we can negotiate with the Republican Party as it is now. They're intransigent, they're unassailable, and they're downright fascist. We've been saying this for the last 3 or 4 years, and we'll continue to say it until things change. We hope you'll please consider becoming a member of our Facebook group page. You can find us on Facebook. It's called Divided We Stand. It's a nice page, very, very successful, and feel free to join. There is a questionnaire in the beginning that you have to agree to. Basically, to trash the party because we need to win an election again in 2024. Also, if you're new to this YouTube channel, this is Divided We Stand on YouTube. We are not monetized, and we ask only that you subscribe. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give us a thumbs down. Whatever you have to do, just do something with your thumbs, and that's all that matters. So, thank you. Enough about that. It's now around 9:08, Saturday, August 5th. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my good friend, person I haven't seen for 2 weeks. Dave, how are you doing?
Okay. Better than Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although he seems to be a ghost in our heads, Dave. I don't know. You know, you always tell yourself, well, maybe this will end now, and then it's worse than ever, isn't it?
Brian, there's no end to it. Okay, there's no end to it. One of two ways. One is with the court hearings and different legal proceedings will continue, so he'll be in our head that way. And of course, the most frightening is the fact that currently he is by a large margin, the front runner for the Republican nomination to run for the presidency in 2024. We've said it all along, or said ever since 2016. You have to be somewhat skeptical of the polls. My theory on that is that years and years and years ago there were three major polls, Gallup and Harris being two of them, Roper being the third, and they were really devoted to trying to be accurate. A couple things have happened that brings poses some problems for pollsters. One is the advent of cell phones. There for a while it was hard because they were kind of locked into landlines, but they've kind of been able to overcome that. But what we have now is everybody has a pollster, right? And so it depends on what poll you want to look at. There's no question Donald Trump is in trouble. The question is, will it be enough trouble to keep him from being president? So what I'd like to start with tonight, if you're okay, let's really break down the 5 charges in the most recent indictment. First of all, the most recent indictment is the most serious. There's no question about that. By the numbers now, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump, a former president of the United States, is facing 78 separate criminal charges right now. 78. Not one, not two, 78. And that's not done. We still have Georgia.
Right.
And indications are that Georgia will file some criminal charges against him for election tampering there. So let's look at the 5 that came out this week. And maybe rather than read all 5, I'll bring up one and then we can talk a little bit about it.
Sure.
In the second and the third. All right. So the first thing is, of course, is pressuring state legislators and election officials to subvert the election results with knowingly false claims of fraud. So basically what that is he was asking that Biden votes be eliminated, if you will, or his votes enlarged in some way to change the voting. Probably that's that. Well, it's hard to say what is the most serious charge, but what do you think about that one? Well, we'll leave that one up first.
Well, first of all, he's trying. When we're talking about he's trying to steal votes, he's stealing your vote, my vote, or anybody who's like you or me, and that is insulting to any American. That my vote would not count. I mean, that's the whole basis of a democracy. That you have the right to voice your opinion, and the majority wins or rules. And apparently, this is an active fashion. This is an individual who wants to insulate himself from loss. He can't accept loss. So putting pressure, on a state that has already clearly gone in the other direction in terms of the vote, it's illegal. I mean, what else can you say?
Well, down here in Washington, D.C., where I live, there's a debate raging over part of the wording of that, which is knowingly false claims of fraud. There are people on Trump's side saying that he didn't knowingly know that there was fraud. He didn't, and basically what they're saying is he didn't know what he was doing. That's a great defense, right?
Right, and that's the only place they can go right now is saying he didn't know. What was his motivation? And
Right.
this is when you act like a mobster and you use semantic fiat for every expression that you have. Essentially, you'll never be guilty if you just take it at face value that he doesn't know.
Now, the next in this unsealed documents this week, we get organizing fraudulent slates of electors in 7 states. So basically, the 7 states are, let me look at them here just so I get them right: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one question I would have about that is Georgia is the only state at this point considering charges, or they have a grand jury investigating. Will the other 6 come forward? Does that mean he'll be facing even more? And basically what it says they did is he instead of having the electors, so we know the Electoral College, instead of having the electors who would go to represent the vote as the state delivered it, so in this case, Biden electors would cast their vote for Biden. What he wanted to do is establish 7 different groups in 7 states that obviously would say, no, that's not the case. Donald Trump won. Wow. I mean, we know he doesn't act normally. He doesn't act normally as a human being, and he certainly doesn't act normally as a president. But when you think about that, I mean, that's kind of stunning. Not just 1 state, just not 2 states, 7 separate states. It didn't happen, but just because it didn't happen this time doesn't mean it won't happen next time.
Right.
And that's really, I think, the biggest danger of Donald Trump is the fact that he has, in my opinion, changed American politics forever.
I agree.
Forever. And there's going to be, before at least it was kind of a semblance of order and a semblance of civility, and that no longer applies. Now, the next one is charged with attempting to use the authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations, with the idea being, of course, then they would send letters to battleground states claiming to have identified significant and fraud concerns. Basically, what that is he was asking the Justice Department to falsely claim that there was election fraud when there wasn't. There have been experts who have said this was probably the cleanest, if you will, presidential election in history because there was so much focus on it. But what Trump wanted at that point was to have the Justice Department, the highest ranking legal department in the country, falsely claim that there were irregularities, which there weren't. Now, one of the dangers, again, with Trump is people are believing him. So does this mean that every vote now taken in a city or a township or a state or a county, does that come under this kind of scrutiny? Is that just what everybody will say now? Oh, I didn't lose, I won. No, right. Mr. Trump. And I did like that. Apparently, aside here, the judge, who was a Democrat in Washington, D.C., refused to call him President Trump.
Correct.
Referred to him as Mr. Trump, which made him irate. And anybody who can make him irate is good in my book. And of course, there is no, again, he doesn't, I think it's interesting, right? He doesn't show any decorum for the office. For example, minor point, but he doesn't even go to the inauguration, right? First president in a long, long time, certainly our lifetime, and before that, not to attend. And now, normally you would refer to an ex-president as Mr. President. But he wants that, but he doesn't want to do the things that a president should do.
Right. He just calls him Biden or Crooked Joe.
Or yeah. And so what I think, again, is the fourth area that was looked at was, of course, trying to get then Vice President Pence in a ceremonial role to not sign and authorize in Congress the results of the election. And Pence basically said, no, I'm not going to do this. But certainly he was pressured by Trump to do that. I don't think there's any question. I'm sure they have witnesses who can testify that Pence being one of them. Right. And the quote that is all appears in the court records already is Trump accused Pence of just being too honest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Pence is running as a candidate for 2024. I will bet you $4,700,000 that I don't have that he will not be the nominee. But it will be interesting as he stays in the race. Will he become even more critical of Donald Trump? Which he is, he's probably the most recognizable candidate so far who is attacking. DeSantis is kind of laying off, and the others are kind of laying off at this point. And then the final one of the five is the one that every American saw, and that's exploiting the violence and chaos on January 6th to convince members of Congress to delay the certification. Wow. I mean, I don't know. It almost makes me speechless. Anyone who watched live when that happened, which I did, or watched later on tape, which I've done, how you can say that was anything other than an insurrection, and it caused injury and fatalities to officers of the United States, and certainly Trump did nothing for hours to quell that, even though they were his people. And there is a question of, did his remarks actually incite the crowd to go? And I would have to say, if everything we know about that is on the record, I would have to say yes. He said, "We'll go, we'll go up there, and I'll meet you up there." Basically, is what he said. So he said, so I'm going to follow my president. So they're the five, each one very, very serious, each one carrying the possibility of jail. So on the other ones, we went not questions. Do you have your view of the entire package? As you
Well,
say it.
first of all, it goes without saying that and everybody has been saying that Smith kept it very, very simple so he could get this thing in before the election. We know that the Trump team, legal team, is going to try to stall. That's the game. Then if they can stall that long enough, of course, he'll hopefully, in their mind, he'll become president, and then he'll pardon himself. Or if somebody else takes over, they'll pardon him. So I think that what he did was the right thing to do. We know there are other co-conspirators. We know there are people involved like Eastman, Giuliani, probably Peter Navarro. And there are probably people out there, and you already see he wants to threaten. There'll be Mark Meadows and perhaps even Kushner, who may be acting as witnesses. It's hard to say. But in terms of what Jack Smith did, I think it was the right thing. And they've said that of all the different indictments, and there are obviously three, but there'll be a fourth, this is the one that has the chance of going to trial the quickest because it has the least amount of documentation. Now, that doesn't matter because, it depends on the judge. Now, as you said, the judge is a Democrat, and that's a good thing. And we know that Trump has been throwing things out there to the Supreme Court, and that's more what I worry about than anything else. I mean, there's already been the discussion about will this be televised, because John Roberts, I don't know if you know or not, but I believe they said that John Roberts would make the decision whether this would be televised. Not they don't have to televise it, but
I'm not aware of that, and it surprises me a little bit. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but in normal legal proceeding, the judge presiding decides whether it'll be viewed or not. If you remember the OJ trial, that's why the judge took some heat because Judge Ito, from having it televised and making it a circus. I think you'd be hard pressed not to televise it. But again, as you point out, Brian, once something gets to the Supreme Court, we all have to remember the court is stacked 6-3. Now, that doesn't mean, it means going in, Republicans have 6, they can lose a vote and still hold their position. So that would be a worrying thing. There may be, I'm sure there'll be a movement. It would be interesting. I think it's interesting. A lot of times, there's an indication of if you want don't want the trial to be televised, which Trump would be the group asking for that. Then are you innocent? If you're innocent, don't you want to proclaim to everyone your innocence and let the nation see it and make up their own mind? The other thing I think will happen on this, it's already in the process. I'm sure there'll be a request for a change of venue.
Right, and that's a problem too.
Because, and this is a fact, it's almost 90% those who declare a political party in the actual Washington, D.C. are Democrats. And of course that would, but I don't know if that alone would be able to
disqualify them. I mean, it's just...
and actually there's already been a report out that they have a suggested place to hold the trial.
Yeah, West Virginia.
West Virginia. And of course they want it there because Trump defeated Biden, I think, by 40 points.
Right.
So your chances of getting,
and not only that, all you need is one juror, and then that's it. So there's the problem as it is. So it's much, much harder for the prosecution. But, I'm just looking at this. You went through all 5, Dave. I think it's so obvious. And of course, I'm a Democrat. I'm partisan. But it's so obvious with his guilt. But the problem has always been that he acts like a mob boss. I know I'm getting kind of loose with my discussion here, Dave, but he talks like a mob boss. He knows how to phrase things in such a way that he doesn't come right out and say it. So, it's like if the glove doesn't, you can't convict if the glove doesn't fit. If he doesn't say the exact words, like I'm doing this on purpose, it seems so absurd. Just when they keep promoting this idea, he didn't know to the point that now it's in everybody's head, and we're playing semantics with this guy. I mean, it just seems like it doesn't matter. We have to jump through hoop, and I think that even though it should be a shut and closed case, Dave, that it's going to get back to us again. It's like we're the only one that can put him out. But as you said, politics in this country have changed forever. And as you've been saying, what will happen in the next election, what we can expect is going to be a lot worse. Because if he knew, which we as Democrats or we as rational thinking people know that he knew he was going to lose ahead of time because he kept talking about the mail-in vote. He kept talking about we're watching North Philadelphia and West Philadelphia. Like he knew some very specific things. Like here's a guy who's not even from Philly, doesn't really know or should know the difference between West Philly, North Philly, and South Philly and Center City. But he knew to attack West Philly. We're watching you. That's exactly what he said. So to me, he knew well ahead of time. Somebody told him something very specific is when you get the African-American vote starting to come in places like West Philly, we're talking about Philadelphia, but West Philly, this is where it's going to turn the tide. And a lot of these are going to be mail-in votes, and you're going to lose. And this is why he was worried about it long ago. So if he was worried about it then and started doing this thing, he knew ahead of time that he was going to lose. That's why he tried to declare at 11:30 in the evening. Dave, what do we have to look forward to with the next? Because this means that the planet's up, and now he's got accomplices throughout Congress.
Right. Well, there is I'll give the only ray of light that I've seen, and I take it with a ton of skepticism because it comes from a poll. But there is a poll out there now that says that half of the Republicans polled, and you always have to remember the poll. You could get a skewed poll, not meaning you get one, right? I mean, because it's kind of, they try to balance it out, but maybe you don't get enough grandmoms on the poll, whatever. That half the Republicans polled would not vote for Trump if indeed he was charged with a felony. I don't know that. I don't know if that's if that's true, that's good. Okay, but I don't know that would hold. Let's role reverse here just for a moment. And if you are a Republican, quite honestly, Brian, if you were a Republican, do you want Joe Biden to be president or do you want Donald Trump to be president?
It's obvious.
Right. So, what you say now and what happens. What Trump is really, really good at, and it's sad, but it's a convincing argument to his people. He's really, really good at playing the victim, which I find ironic because he really wants to be known as a billionaire, right? And how does a billionaire become? How does a billionaire become a victim? A pauper can become a victim, but he's very, very good at that. And so what happens is, as these indictments come in, and you know that every time the indictments have come in, his fundraising has increased.
Right.
Every single time.
But so have his legal bills. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, if it gets to the legal bills, you have to wonder when you send any money to Donald Trump, you have to wonder, it might go to Donald Trump's next hamburger. You don't know from McDonald's.
Right, but I'm saying if he at least that as much as he doesn't pay for any of this, is that at least if it gets funneled to his legal bills, that means it's money he can't take himself or his family can't take because he just wants everything.
And that's it. But this idea, and of course, so actually, if you think about it in a perverse sort of way, every indictment for Trump is a good indictment. Because for those who believe that he's set up, that believe it's a witch hunt, who believe that sleepy Joe Biden is conspiring to, with a whole bunch of Democrats, to bring down the great Donald Trump. The second thing, if you notice, that he's very good at, which is interesting, even though he sucks all the air out of the room, even though I can't conceive of a more classic case of a narcissist anywhere in any time period in history. He's very good about saying, they're not really after me. They're after you.
You, right.
It's not my vote that they're taking away. It's your vote. And there's a lot of, right now we're in a huge, huge, huge culture war that plays out in, now France says half the country has shit for brains. It'd be hard to argue with that, the way we look at it.
Well, they're pliable. I mean, that's for sure. And that's essentially what he's saying. I mean, it's a pliable group, and that's a big problem. Now, the other thing is if they're that pliable, maybe we need to have some, propaganda of our own to change it around. Well, maybe too late.
That's. I mean,
I mean, how you even do it?
No, I know. Now you really get into one of the age-old questions of all time. Ends and means, right? Means justify the end by any means necessary. Do you do things? At what point do you betray your own values? In trying to win. That's a tough call. We've mentioned before. I think Joe Biden comes from a different era. He comes from a time when you really could reach across the aisle, if you will, to get something done. I don't see those days ever again, at least not in my lifetime, because what happens is the Republicans have to be concerned about being outrighted on their side. They're not so concerned in the gerrymandered districts about their Democratic opponent. They don't care. What they do care about is their own job, because with this strong MAGA voting bloc, they have to do that, and so you don't see too many of them coming out against Donald Trump. You did the day,
And not only that, do you think part of it is the fear of the constituency? We've talked about this before. I mean, I know that, but the constituency. I mean, the same people who came out and met Lindsey Graham at the airport. It seems like the Republican Party put themselves in a little bit of a pickle, because now it seems like it's not just January 6th. Well, actually, if you think about January 6th, who did they go after first? That was Mike Pence. He's a Republican.
right?
So it seems to me that it's not only the fact that the Republican congresswomen and congressmen, senators, not only are they afraid of Trump, but they're also afraid of their own constituents, because they're, as Franz said, kind of the shit for brains. There's just enough individuals out there who might do something. I mean, look what they did on January 6th. It's a different creature. You still haven't seen. You don't see violent protests at Black Lives Matter. You don't see us storming the Capitol.
But what's interesting is you're absolutely right. But they said that it was just tourists at the Capitol. Right?
Well, again, there's semantic fiat there. I mean,
or they were patriots at the Capitol, one or the other, right? Veg has a point. You can kind of.
Folks, those who get the wrench, I think it's Veg and Trev. I have no idea what's going on in the chat. That may be a YouTube thing. I'm just going to post what I can, what comes through my feed on Ecamm. So I'll do my best.
Why is it so important? And you touched upon this earlier. Why is it so important for Trump to do two things? One is to delay all the hearings as long as he and his legal team can do that. And the reason they want to do that is the standing Department of Justice has ruled in the past, and it's pretty much established, that a sitting president cannot be found criminally liable while sitting. That's one thing. If you win the election, and you pointed that out, he could pardon himself. Now, very few people would pardon themselves. I'd be interested, and I don't know that. If anybody out there listening to tonight or viewing this later knows, I don't know if anybody who's ever pardoned themselves. I'm sure it's been done somewhere, but it's certainly not the presidential level. I mean, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, correct? But that was okay. And actually, that's an interesting thing. That's still open to debate. And of course, I lived during that period. And I despise Richard Nixon, but I do think Gerald Ford did the right thing. I really do. The point was to get Nixon out, and we did. They did. But look who was doing it. You had Barry Goldwater, Mr. Conservative. Famous quote that supposedly he said. Nixon looked at him. They were sitting in the Oval Office during that time of the Watergate, and Barry Goldwater said, "Well, I have support. I support." But I said, "Well, I think you might have 2 votes in the Senate, and I'm not one of them." We don't see that. I mean, think how far. That's not all that long ago, right? I mean, that's not forever. 72. It's not like 1772 or 1872. And when you think today, yes, you had Liz Cheney come out, and Liz is no longer.
But how about Pence, though, Dave? It seems like Pence, because he testified at the grand jury. Now this is the case that deals with this testimony. He seems like he really he's in a rock and a hard place now, where he has to come out one way or another. And he seems like he has. Not that I'm not giving him a badge here.
No. I understand. No, I understand. Well, anytime.
But he's cornered like Trump, but he's cornered in a different way.
Anytime you do the right thing, I mean, that's a good thing, right? Doing the right thing, and of course, he did that. He's done it twice now. What I wonder about with Pence is. You mentioned before, and it's the key word in all, probably in life, motivation, right? Well, what's motivating him right now is, I don't think I'm going to go dangerous here and get in somebody's mind. I always say don't do it. I don't think he sees he has a chance to be the Republican nominee. But let me catch my terms here. And we'll talk a little bit. Had we done this show 6 months ago, maybe even 5 months ago, it would be a different topic because we would have Governor DeSantis from Florida as the front runner. And his campaign is going down. Trump's is going up. But so if somehow Trump is not the nominee, that does open it up for somebody else. So maybe, I don't think it would be Pence, but that, it doesn't mean that it's a Don Quixote tilting at windmills kind of thing. And I think, he did the right thing when he told Donald Trump, I'm not going to do this. And he said, I can't do it. He said, it wouldn't matter. It's ceremonial. I mean, that's what's so crazy about this, Brian, this whole thing. And I keep coming back to my statement that I really believe is true. The president isn't as powerful as people think he is, or hopefully someday as she is. Mm-hmm. But what they do is set the tone for the nation. And Trump, by going so rogue, if you will, according to all political niceties, has now established new non-nice niceties, if there is such a thing. And so, not only set a bad tone for the country, and would set even worse. Now, the other thing would be that, can you imagine, and you can, so if he were to get to be president, the revenge, he wouldn't govern. I mean, he didn't govern before. God. But I mean, he's already threatening. I mean, if you look at some of his remarks on his Truth Social, indicating, witch hunt and Smith is this and Smith is that. Now, there is a possibility. They're talking here in D.C. about coming at him another way of claiming that he is actually threatening the justice system by attacking prosecutors. Again. It depends on how it plays out, Brian. It depends on how it plays out. If he gets a trial in West Virginia, that's one thing. If he gets a trial in Washington, D.C., let's look at what Keith has to say. Sure. Sitting here in New Zealand, we just don't understand how your politics work. Keith, sitting here in America, I don't understand how our politics work. I understand how they used to work. Here's a politician with a sniffle of what Trump has. Could you put it back up?
Sorry, yeah, I'll make that up.
What Trump has, they would be forced to quit. So how's the USA degraded to the cult of Trump, I guess, is what we cut off there. Well, I think fear, hatred, the culture wars, I think is what's actually happening. So I'm going to shift topic a little bit. We always come back to Trump because we could do an all Trump show all the time, and look at a little bit about some things that are going on that set a stage why the stakes are so high. So in Iowa, like so many other Republican-controlled states, they passed a law that school districts must review its books before they can be put on the shelves. Now, every American should be concerned about censorship because, who censors the censors? Will we get into something, and again, with this political swing, will it be revenge on the books? So the books. So what happens is, here are just 4 books that have been, 3 books that have been questioned, and they probably are 3 of the more important books in American/British/world literature. 1984, right? We read that in high school. Catcher in the Rye, long-standing, often held up as the first great piece of young adult fiction. And Ulysses by James Joyce. Now, I'm not so much worried I'm joking, but I wouldn't be so much worried if they banned Ulysses because nobody understands that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you ever find anybody who's spent less than 40 years as an Irish Joycean scholar, I question that because it's an amazing book. And they're all from, now see what's interesting from 1984, they're not attacking that from a political sense. They're actually the sex scenes in there. Keith, censorship is the beginning of the fall. I think you're right. Now, let me get the number here. I want to get it right. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean when Iowa passes to this? Well, this one relatively small district, the Urbandale Community School District in Iowa, has flagged 374 books. And that's just a start. That means 374 books that librarians or educators or both felt were valuable for students, or very important, that students thought were valuable for students, now will no longer be available under this law. Now, Brian, how do you're a teacher. I used to be. I know, because I was an English teacher. So I'll just flat out say censorship is wrong. End of story. No discussion, nothing. Now, having said that, I think there are age-appropriate books. Don't get me wrong. But if you're going to have a library situation where all kinds of students go, I think, you have to look at the older ones. I mean, you don't want graphic sex manuals necessarily in third grade. But the books that they're looking at in the lower grades are not so much sexual in terms of heterosexual. They're more in terms of gay sex, acceptance, transgender acceptance, all the things that we should be working for, right? Or not. So where do you fall in the censorship thing, Brian?
Well, I see it, actually, I believe it's a two-pronged attack. It's not only, well, maybe three, not only what does not get in, but what they do have come in. And then as a teacher, when they're getting involved in curriculum and they're trying to get involved in the school boards, now it makes it even more difficult for the teacher, because you and I, we've said this before during the show, Dave and I were very much alike, whether it was in music or it was teaching. We had the same basic style of improvisation. There was not, I'm not saying it's the better way to teach, it's just another way of teaching is what we did best. And when somebody says, do this, don't do that, I mean, that's a problem. Because now, if you get the wrong school board or the wrong principal appointed or assistant principal, whatever, now they can put the pressure on you and you're going to do it this way. And we've seen already what's happened in terms of history with slavery in Florida. I don't know how anybody would want to teach down there after that. That's so insulting.
Well, I mean, and again, education is a crisis. And one of the crises is the fact that education is losing more teachers than it's bringing in. And as education gets more and more and more and more and more political, I think you're going to lose more and more teachers. Or you're going to get people who just say it's just not worth it. I mean, I'm not going to go into teaching.
And don't forget, it's not just the salary that's the problem. It's the range or the scope of what you have to do as a teacher, and that creates problems. And by the way, I was watching Fox today. They were interviewing somebody talking about education, and of course, the first thing Fox said is, if you notice, the scores have gone down in the last 3 years all across the country, the grade level reading and all blah blah blah. And it was kind of interesting because whoever was on there, I have to apologize, I didn't watch all of it because I was just watching while I was eating lunch and this and that. But again, the point is that they throw that out, not even understanding how these scores, it takes a while for it to thread through the years. You know what I mean? Well, and again, you have the problem of fewer teachers there, so now it's even a bigger problem. But in many cases, they're blaming the teacher. And the minute you see a teacher who has sexual intercourse with a student or something like that, that's the main thing. So it vilifies.
Well. And of course,
the people that do that crap in all fields.
Well, I've always felt very strongly about test scores. I think they're basically useless, in the sense that they're socioeconomically driven. Rich districts have high test scores. Poor districts have low test scores. Communities that are split, where people have money, their test scores are usually higher, their children's test scores. And the other thing has to be taken in, we're not making excuses for teaching. Teaching, let's look at this. Let's what Lou will put up here. Teaching can be done without books, and the priority would be, put it back up, would be who, what, where, why, and how to learn. That's true, but I don't know whether teenagers and pre-teenagers, how many of them can be kind of you're talking about there being about autodidact. Yeah. I mean, obviously you get some, my favorite autodidact happens to be my favorite playwright, American playwright. Well, actually my favorite playwright ever, August Wilson. And basically that's what he was. But he had a focus and could do that. With his education mess, the other thing to consider as the test scores go down, you got to take into consideration how much teaching was actually done during COVID. Not much. Not faulting the teacher. Nobody was ready. I couldn't have done any better. I actually did work with a teacher. I mean, I saw how hard it was.
And the students checking out, basically. They're behind that camera. You don't even see them on the camera.
Right. And so, we're going to pay for that too. And of course, you could take that back to Trump. Censorship is the beginning of controlling the history of man. Politics, etc., the stifles debate, and therefore the opportunity for the rise of a dictator. Cool. Absolutely, Keith. Nothing to argue with you there. I think that's what. I mean, that's the ultimate. In between of all the things that are lost, what does, well, let's put it this way. Okay, do you have to read 1984 to be a successful human being? And the answer is no. But if you read and understand and get good guidance from 1984, it certainly shows you why we're worried about what they're doing. 1984 is a book that says fascism is out there. What is it? Facts can be changed at any. I mean, it's almost like, Trump didn't read it as a primer, but it does show you. It does show you that what George Orwell was concerned about can happen very easily, and is happening here. You mentioned Florida. Do you realize? I don't know if you do. I know a lot of times I say, "Do you realize?" You're really being.
I understand. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'm trying to do this right. Okay. What they did is actually, first of all, the name of the act that's the umbrella for the education reform is Stop the Woke Act. Mm.
Well, right away. Loaded, absolutely. And of course, one of the first things they attacked was the teaching of African American history. Now, just a quick primer for everybody most people know this, but one of the things that there's offered in the majority of public schools in America is the AP, Advanced Placement Test. And what that is the course I taught AP for a few years. It's a more rigorous course, if you will, designed, if you pass, a lot of colleges will give you credit. So it's like kind of a, not quite a college class, but certainly much tougher, more rigorous than a high school class or a general class, even than an academic class. Well, Governor DeSantis, who is running for president, who, if it's not Donald Trump, at one point thought he would be the president. And I had to laugh. There were a couple of people who said, well, he won't run the country like he ran Florida. Yeah, he will. Yeah, he will.
Yes, he will.
Yes, he will. He'll even have more power to do more. Actually had the audacity to get inserted in the state guidelines for teaching African American history the following: that in bondage, slaves learned things that could be used for their personal benefit. Learn skills. Really? And that is now the law, the statement in Florida with African American history.
I'm just wondering if he's trying to chase people out of Florida.
Well, I don't. Well, maybe he's trying to chase a certain kind of person out of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing is, he's got a hard time because Florida weather.
That's incendiary. I mean, it's just
Oh no,
to
no,
me
no, no,
that's.
no. Yeah,
And of course, he just said, "Well, it wasn't me. It was the it's part of education within Florida." I mean, making excuses.
yeah, and of course, yeah. He also questioned at one point. He said the African American Studies (AP Studies) lacked educational value. Now, I think if anything, race is not well taught in America. I think I'd love to know prior to the Watchmen series on HBO, which was I don't, did you watch that at all, Brian?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's a comic thing, but it got pretty and they changed a little bit for television, and it made quite a bit out of the Tulsa Massacre. I didn't know anything about the Tulsa Massacre until I was maybe 20 years ago. It was never even touched on in school. I grew up in Seabrook Village, which is a community not close to where you live, actually the same township, and we had a large Japanese American population. I never learned anything about the internment camps, until I was in college. So on one hand, I just don't think we do a good job. And what it sounds like, DeSantis and Iowa and these other states, they want control. They want control of text. They want control of thought. They want control of history. They want control of morality. And they're not interested in anything that doesn't conform to that. I will venture to say that I bet you Donald Trump has never read 1984 Ulysses or The Catcher in the Rye.
Mm-hmm.
I feel pretty confident saying that. Would he be a better president? No, maybe not. Donald Trump is the exception. But if we continue, we're talking about polarizing the country, right? Well, Florida, the end result, I don't know if you saw this, the end result is that the NAACP, still arguably the most influential group for African Americans in the country, has actually issued a travel advisory for Black Americans visiting Florida. So you're talking about driving people out. And, they said they're trying to sanitize it. They're trying to, actually basically lie about Black Americans in the state of Florida or Black Americans across the country. And therefore you should not go there. Global solidarity, I think that's a very important part. If I had my years of experience, 31 years in education in various forms, I always try, again, I'm not saying, oh, what a good boy am I, but I always thought it was important to involve your students. And I do think a lot of times that is something that school districts really aren't very good at. However, you have to be careful, okay?
Really, yeah, it's true too. We've learned that, yeah.
Because students, if you ask them, okay, today we can study 1984 or we can have a free period, what are they going to say, Brian?
Free period. Free day.
Free day. So I think there's a way to do that, and this is not an educational show, in terms of really looking at it, but I think, again, now we're going to circle back around. I think you could say that Trump, maybe not as directly, maybe not as directly, no, Trump hasn't read Mein Kampf. He might have it on his nightstand. Which I think it's just sad. Trump even said, I don't think
he has the focus. Do you think he has the focus to be able to read a book? Not that he can't read. He just doesn't have the ability to sit there. He's just indefatigable. He's got to keep moving around, and he's just like that. I don't see how he can sit and read.
I know
he watches.
I know there's people in government who said that they would send him a one-page synopsis, and he said, I can't read all that. I don't want to bother with that. I don't want to be bothered with that. Because, of course, he would say, I know it better than anyone else, or only I can do this. Or what book? Global, I missed that. Did he put a book up there? I had the book and got me in trouble. I don't know. So, Global, my bad.
Probably Mein Kampf. They're probably referring back to Mein Kampf, Tom. because that was the comment after it.
I don't know. Okay, yeah, that would make sense. So, as we begin to wind down, where are we tonight on August? Was it August 5th? Is that right?
Well, Dave, aren't we going to find out when it comes? Is the whole ball game, as they've said, at least on liberal media? I don't even want to say liberal media because I've had I hate even calling MSNBC liberal. They just seem to be more attuned to the facts. Maybe
They
it's
are,
just
no,
me.
but they do,
And they do have Republicans on there, though. That's the difference, though. They
Right.
have Republicans on
Right.
there. We have just like Jack Smith has had. There's 88 Republicans as witnesses, or whatever it is, or 86. But it all comes down to when that date for the trial. That's what it comes down to. And sooner or later, the judge has got to come. My suggestion is that she will come up with a date, and then. I don't know anything about law aside from I imagine that somehow they'll appeal that date.
Well, I think she offered them 3 dates for the next appearance, and they took the August 28th. So the next.
And they wanted to extend that.
Yes. Well, that's it. Of course. Well, Brian, that's it. It's the idea, as we said, the idea is clearly delay on one hand, and victory in 2024 on the other.
Right.
Because that's the protections. If you were to ask which one does Trump prefer, I'm sure he would prefer to be president again.
And not only that, but he's also, again, this goes back to what we were talking about. They have to prepare because they know they're going, well, I don't think they know they're going to lose, but they're going to play the game as though they are going to lose. So they are going to do something illegal again. He always does. He's a criminal. He will always do it illegally.
I couldn't argue with that, Brian. I think you're absolutely right.
And now he's got people who will do it with him.
Well, because of the things they can get.
Don't you think Ted Cruz would somehow, or Abbott would somehow do what Jeb Bush was probably trying to do for his brother? It's just, this is where we go with this. It's we have to put him out. We can't depend on Jack Smith because we can't even depend on what happens in the courts. You can't even depend that all 12 jurors are going to go against him, though it should be 12-0. Dave, look, we have a lot of skin in the game in this, and we still have to come out and do something. But I think you've alluded to this. You've alluded to it since Biden was elected. It's scary. I think maybe we should worry more about what we have to do. I don't know.
I think you're right. I mean, I think something. I mean, it's early yet in one sense, but it's so important that it's not early all the way. I think one of the things that I would encourage anyone who wants to defeat Donald Trump or the Republicans has to do. They have to do a little bit with their pocketbook. You have to, and send to somebody who's who's worth it. If you think it's Biden, send it for Biden. I think somebody who is a pretty good senator and also would be key to keeping any control is John Tester in Montana. I think you look at these kinds of people. Maybe your local district doesn't need the money at this point because it's a Democratic area, but the other thing, support. It's just hard because, I've said it and you said it and we've all said it, is, we put this half thing in and we really shouldn't put half the country. It's really a third, and a third, right? Third liberal Democrat, a third conservative, Trumpian MAGA Republican, and a third who don't cast their ballots.
Except for the Supreme Court, it's a third and 2/3, and that's the.
Well, that's. I mean, yes, but I'm talking about the country as a whole. So really, they always talk about key votes. Well, they'll be the same as before. Will the minority vote come out for Joe Biden in particular, in specifically the black vote? Also, I think women have to look at with the abortion issue. Do they want a Democrat? Do they want a Republican? Gay Americans, transgender Americans.
Well, Dave, let me ask you. Forgetting about a fair election, if you were a criminal, what kinds of things would you do as a politician? If you were a criminal / politician, you had a devious criminal mind, what would you do if you wanted to win an election?
exactly what Donald Trump's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
You react
And that's
to the
my
moment.
point.
You react to the moment.
You do every possible, and even if you do lose the election, you're going to do what he did with the January 6th. So this
Right.
thing, this show is going to be on a long time. Let me tell you. And by the way, this show at 180 shows, I just thought with the head in the box with all the videos did there with climate change, blah blah blah. This
And
is going to be around for a long time.
and that's something we certainly don't want to shortchange. But there's so many problems. Climate change, of course, hinges. In general, Republicans don't believe in climate change. In general, Democrats do.
And wouldn't care about it even if they did believe in it.
And that's part of it, because what you're doing then, you're putting the short term gain ahead of the possibility of even having a world. I mean, I don't know how anybody who even,
because the politicians are going to survive, if anybody's going to survive. They don't really even care about their own. They are revolted by their own, but they don't have to deal with it. As long as they vote for them, that's all that they care for.
And again, I kind of understand that if I felt strongly about something. I mean, but it doesn't make it right that it's done that way. I just yes, Gary, that is correct. I saw.
When
today.
is that, by the way? Did you know?
I don't know when it is. I think they're working out the details. I don't know if they actually have the details.
End of the month, maybe?
That will be interesting, because Gavin Newsom is a name of note in the Democratic Party.
Right, but do you trust Hannity? It sounds like it's going to be it's going to be Hannity.
Well, of course, but
adding his 2 cents in.
But again, I give Governor Newsom credit for going on. I mean,
yeah, I think it is smart.
And it's pretty clearly obvious. Obviously you're not going to get a fair shake on that show. I wouldn't think. I can't see. Hannity is a player in this MAGA thing. And that, I think, I want to end right there with global solidarity. This is my last remark, and then you can close this out, Brian. I think that bears repeating. The only power a citizen has is a single vote, nothing else except jury duty. And I think that's kind of captures.
If that vote counts. If that vote counts.
And there you are.
All right.
So,
Dave, I want to thank you.
Go ahead. I stepped on yours.
No. I want to thank you very much, and I hope everything's going well with you. And I'm going to sign off after the show. I mean, just so you know. But thank you.
Well,
thank you very much.
I enjoy doing it, and I like the fact that we have this, and we've used the word. I don't think it's being too schmaltzy, if you will. Family on Saturday night. People who I'm, for the most part, share the views that we hold, come in, and you say it at what should I say? It's to commiserate. Sometimes it's to talk. Sometimes it's. I mean, we're not political pundits. We're not any more in the know. We just know what we read in the paper or what we hear.
But we tend to, we are right sometimes, though.
I think I'm not saying we're not. I'm just saying.
It's that intuition.
And of course, Governor, Global just put up there. Governor Newsom is the next presidential candidate. I think right now he is, but I would give you two words of caution to that. One is Scott Walker. He was once that way in the Republicans. And a more recent example, Beto O'Rourke. Everybody thought he was going to be the next thing. But Newsom does, coming from the state of California. He
might have been the next thing. We don't even know what happened down there with the vote.
Well, that's true.
But we'll never know, at least seemingly.
But anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Hope to see you, hear you next week.
And please share, folks. Okay, Dave, I'll probably get a hold of you during the week. We'll see.
Sounds good.
I keep promising having a show that's not live, but we'll see. There. All right.
All right.
All right.
Take
Thank
care,
you,
brother.
everybody.